I don't think Labour having a new leader is on the agenda. So what's not on the agenda is pointless speculating about. I mean, Starmer is not Boris Johnson. He is not Liz Truss. What he says today is what he said 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Liz, I know well, same college at Oxford with her. I liked her when she was in the Commons, got on very well. But she has sat on every point of the political compass, and she'll find some new ones to sit on if she becomes PM. I'm fascinated, Alison, by the comparison with Mrs. Thatcher. Liz was just 5 years old when she was elected. Rishi Sunak wasn't even born. Margaret Thatcher, for me, was the greatest tax raiser in British history when she doubled VAT early on in her mandate and destroyed northern industrial manufacturing industry. She then promoted the single market, the freedom of movement, all the things that we're now told we must oppose. She was the absolute obsessional archangel of, including enlargement to two very poor countries, Spain and Portugal. So this idea that we should, or Mr. Sunak or Ms. Truss should adopt Margaret Thatcher's legacy, I wonder if they've actually ever studied it.
Well, that's a lovely and brutal point, and just sits there, and we'll let it sit there for folk to reflect on, and I want them to email me in. But when you've got someone of Rental's longevity and someone of your longevity talking about punk Thatcherism, not the real thing, and I've written as well about the history of it. I remember Geoffrey Howe's first budget, and I will not contradict you on one word in that analysis. The other thing I've picked up upon, Denis, which I genuinely find intriguing, reflecting back on the 2019 general election, where Boris Johnson's huge majority was not least from raiding Labour seats behind the old so-called Red Wall. There are a lot of people now saying if Sunak and Truss model themselves on Thatcher, that's potentially fatal behind the Red Wall, because they remember the mines, they remember the steel industry, they remember shipbuilding, and they don't forgive or forget.
To some extent. I mean, really, if you lost your job in the 1980s, you're probably retired or retired off to heaven by now. I mean, I'm really amazed we're fighting 40-year-old battles. It was like me standing in 1974 for the first time for Parliament, and all I did was go back and start quoting, well, I don't know, what George Lansbury was saying in the 1930s. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm very curious to see whether either Liz Truss or Sunak, they're not stupid. They've both Oxford PPEs. That's this weird, funny little exam that all prime ministers seem to have, Harold Wilson and the rest of them, and see if they come up with something interesting. It's not really happening yet. The election is not on fire, in my view, maybe because it's just far too hot for all of us.
The final point on that, and I'm going to bring Lettuce in because she's listening very closely to what you've been saying there. But the other thing that we've talked about before, and I've also written about, is that at those great moments in history, whether it's coming out of the Second World War or whether it's coming out of the tortuous 1970s or both Thatcher and Blair, to be fair, it tends to be someone who's got a fresh pounding ideology that is them, whether it's Clement Attlee, Margaret Thatcher or Tony Blair, whether you like them or loathe them. Those were the real tipping points. After the last 2 years, you kind of would have thought that the Tories would be looking around for someone of that calibre.
Yes, but their quality, I'm sorry, I don't want to sound like an very old fart, but the quality of MPs is not really what it was when you and I started, you as a reporter, me as a political activist. I agree with that, but I think this is a transition era for all of us. We've got to deal with Brexit. We see the disaster at Dover. I'm not saying we revisit 2016, but we need a new approach to having a more friendly relationship with France in particular, instead of Liz Truss's endless snarking at them. We've got a huge war going on in Europe, and we've got no answer to that. We've got an enormous surge of immigrants coming up, I think, from Africa into Europe. We've got no answer to that. We're in a giant transition period with Biden, with a weak European Commission, with, frankly, no really stellar European leader. Mrs. Thatcher could relate to Ronald Reagan. She could relate to François Mitterrand in France, to Helmut Kohl in Germany. We've got no one like that at the moment. So I think it's going to be transition politics one way or another over the next period. The final tiny point I'd make, because you did mention 2019, Boris, in my judgment, didn't win because he got Brexit done. he was gifted Downing Street by Jeremy Corbyn, an utterly unelectable Prime Minister. Tories might as well have run with Nigel Farage. But Corbyn is the gift that is stopping giving. I'm tracking all the new parliamentary candidates being chosen for Labour seats. They're all moderate, they're all centrist, they all want to get things done. The Corbyn era is over, and if the Tories think that they can bring back the Johnson era, I think that also will be a mistake on their part.